My husband left me for my own sister right after I finished paying off his family's $80,000 debt. And when I called his mother, hoping for some kind of explanation, some kind of comfort, she just smirked and said, "We always liked her better anyway." But they had no clue, absolutely no idea, what I had planned next. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I sat there, in our little kitchen, staring at the zeros on my bank statement. It should have been a victory. A hollow victory, maybe, but a victory nonetheless. $80,000. Gone. Just like that. Wiped away. But it wasn't the money that left that cold, empty pit in my stomach. It was the words that came after. Words that cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. We always liked her better anyway. My mother-in-law's smug voice burned itself into my memory, a cruel final note to what I thought was a loving marriage. But as I watched my husband Walter's back retreating for the last time, as I heard the finality in his mother's voice, something inside me shifted. They thought this was the end. They had no idea it was just the beginning. When I first met Walter, it felt like a scene from one of those old black and white movies. I was a young teacher, chaperoning a school dance. I was standing by the punch bowl, feeling a little awkward, when he walked up to me. He wasn't a parent, just a man who had donated to the school fundraiser and was invited as a guest. He had this smile that just lit up his whole face. His eyes crinkled at the corners. He asked me to dance, and for the rest of the night, we were inseparable. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It was a simple affair, a picnic in the park where we had our 3rd or 4th date. When he got down on one knee, holding a simple, beautiful ring, I didn't hesitate for a second. Yes, I remember crying out, throwing my arms around his neck. At that moment, I thought I knew what true happiness felt like. Our wedding was small, just close family and friends. Walter's family seemed welcoming enough, if a little reserved. His mother, Lorraine, hugged me, but it felt stiff, practiced. She whispered, "Welcome to the family, dear," but her eyes were cold, assessing. I was too swept up in the moment to care. I was ready to start our life. The first 5 years of our marriage were blissful, or so I told myself. We were in love, full of dreams. Walter had a decent job in sales, and I loved my work as an elementary school teacher. We weren't rich by any means, but we were comfortable. We had a small house in a quiet neighborhood. We talked about saving up for a bigger place, maybe starting a college fund for the kids we planned to have. All those things young couples dream about. But beneath the surface, the cracks were starting to form. I just refused to see them. Walter's salary wasn't increasing as quickly as he'd hoped, and the cost of living was going up. We started to argue more about money, about our future. Little arguments, the kind you dismiss as normal marital stress. "We just need to be more careful, Brenda," he'd say, and I'd agree, cutting coupons and skipping my weekly lunch out with the other teachers. I believed we could weather any storm together. Then, the late nights started. He'd come home long after I was in bed, smelling faintly of expensive cologne I didn't recognize. "Networking," he'd mumble. "Big clients." There were quiet, hushed phone calls he'd take out on the back porch. If I asked who it was, he'd wave a hand dismissively. "Just work stuff. You wouldn't be interested." His mother, Lorraine, never helped matters. She'd come over for dinner and make little comments, always with a tight smile. "Oh, Brenda, you made your mother's casserole again? It's so quaint." Or she'd look around our modest living room and say, "It's cozy." But Walter is destined for bigger things, you know. She always made me feel small, like I was holding him back. My own sister, Heather, was a different story. She was 5 years younger than me, the wild child to my quiet, steady one. She was beautiful, vivacious, and a little bit reckless. She'd breeze in and out of our lives, always with a new boyfriend or a new, crazy story. She and Walter got along great. They'd joke and tease each other, a shared energy between them that I just chalked up to them both being more outgoing than me. "You're so lucky, Bren," she'd say, giving me a hug. "Walter's a great guy. You landed a good one." I thought she was happy for me. I thought she was my biggest supporter. What a fool I was. The night everything truly changed, it was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd made tacos, Walter's favorite. I waited and waited, but he didn't come home. The food got cold on the stove. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he walked in. His tie was loosened, his face was pale, and he had a haunted look in his eyes. I knew, before he even opened his mouth, that something was terribly wrong. "Brenda," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to talk." My heart started to pound against my ribs. We sat down at the kitchen table, the one we'd bought at a yard sale when we first got married. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his hands. He explained that his family, his parents, were in deep, deep financial trouble. He painted this dramatic picture of years of bad investments made by his father, of lavish spending by his mother to keep up appearances in their social circle. He said they were facing bankruptcy, possible legal trouble, the loss of their home, everything. "How much?" I asked, my voice shaking. I was dreading the answer. Walter finally looked up, and his eyes were pleading, filled with tears. $80,000, Bren. If we can help them clear this debt, they can avoid bankruptcy. They can start over. Please. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. $80,000. It was more than my entire retirement account. It was the down payment for our future house, the college fund we hadn't even started, our safety net. It was everything we had, and everything we hoped to have. A small, cautious part of my brain whispered, "This doesn't feel right." But I pushed it away. I looked at the man I loved, the man I had built a life with, and all I saw was his pain. I loved him. And despite their cool demeanor towards me, I thought of his family as my own. So, I made the decision that would completely alter the course of my life, a decision I would regret with every fiber of my being. "Okay," I said, reaching across the table and taking his hand. "We'll do it. We'll help them." The relief that washed over his face was so profound, it made me feel like I'd done the right thing. He squeezed my hand and promised me, "I will make this up to you, Brenda. I swear. You're saving us. You're saving my family." The next few months were a blur of financial maneuvering and constant, grinding work. The first thing to go was my 401. I remember sitting in the financial advisor's office, the pen feeling heavy in my hand as I signed the papers to liquidate it, taking a massive penalty hit. That was a big chunk of it. Then, we emptied our joint savings account. It still wasn't enough. I owned a small, classic convertible, a '68 Mustang my dad had left me. It was my one prized possession, my link to him after he passed. It sat in the garage under a cover, a beautiful piece of my past. Walter knew how much it meant to me. One night, he came to me, his face a mask of shame. "Brenda. I know this is a lot to ask, but the car," I didn't even let him finish. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I sold it the next week to a collector." I cried the day he drove it away. I took on every extra tutoring job I could find, working with students in the evenings and on weekends until my eyes burned. Walter worked overtime, he said, coming home late most nights, smelling of exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite place. We barely saw each other. We were like two ships passing in the night, both working towards this single, all-consuming goal. My sister Heather would call sometimes. "Oh my God, Bren, I heard what you're doing. You're literally a saint. Are you sure about this?" "We have to, Heather," I'd say, too tired to explain. "It's family. Well, you're a better woman than me, she'd laugh. If my boyfriend's family went broke, I'd be heading for the hills. But you're something else. I thought it was a compliment. The day we made the final payment, I transferred the last $5,000 from my personal account, the last of the money from my dad's car. I watched the balance drain to almost nothing. I felt a mix of pure exhaustion and overwhelming relief. It was over. We had done it. Walter's family was saved. Now, finally, we could start to rebuild our own lives. I expected gratitude, maybe a family dinner to celebrate. What I got was silence. Weeks turned into a month. Our own financial situation was precarious. We were living paycheck to paycheck, the strain showing in the lines around my eyes and the permanent slump of Walter's shoulders. But I held on to hope. We had overcome this massive hurdle together. Surely our love could conquer anything. When I brought up the silence from his family, Walter just brushed it off. They're proud people, Brenda. It's hard for them to accept help. Give them time. So I gave them time. Then came the day that shattered my entire world into a million tiny pieces. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to stretch $20 of groceries into a week of meals. Walter walked in. There was something different about him. A coldness in his eyes that I'd never seen before. He stood there, leaning against the doorframe, not helping, just watching me. Brenda, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. We need to talk. Those words. Those dreaded words that never, ever precede anything good. I'm leaving, he continued, as if he were discussing the weather. I can't do this anymore. The financial stress, the responsibility, it's too much. I need a fresh start. I need to be with someone who makes me feel alive. I just stood there, frozen, the bag of potatoes slipping from my hand and thudding onto the floor. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. What are you talking about? I stammered. We did this together. We sacrificed everything, for your family. We can get through this. Walter just shook his head, a look of pity on his face that made my stomach turn. There is no we anymore, Brenda. I'm sorry. But this is how it has to be. In a daze, I watched as he went into the bedroom and packed a single bag. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. This couldn't be real. After everything we'd been through, how could he just walk away? He didn't even have the decency to look sad. He looked relieved. As he headed for the front door, a thought struck me. Wait, I said, my voice shaking. What about your family? The debt, the $80,000 we paid off? He paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, just a flicker, I thought I saw something in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. They'll be fine, he said flatly. You should talk to Heather about it. She can explain. And just like that, he was gone. The mention of my sister's name was so random, so out of place, that it barely registered at first. My mind was a fog of pain and confusion. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the closed door. Minutes? Hours? Eventually, I stumbled to the phone. My first instinct was to call my sister. I needed my little sister. I needed her to tell me everything was going to be okay. I dialed her number. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. Strange. I tried again. Voicemail. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I got in my car, my hands trembling so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel, and drove the 15 minutes to her apartment. I used the spare key she'd given me years ago, the one on my keychain with the little sunflower charm. Heather? I called out, my voice hoarse. The apartment was quiet. Then I saw them. On her kitchen counter, next to a half-empty bottle of wine, were Walter's car keys. And on the armchair in the living room was the worn leather jacket he always wore. My blood ran cold. No. It couldn't be. I walked numbly into her bedroom. And there it was. Propped up on her pillow was a framed photo. It was a picture of her and Walter, laughing, on a beach somewhere. They looked so happy. And on her nightstand was the expensive watch I had saved up for months to buy Walter for our 5th anniversary. Just then, the front door opened. It was Heather. She stopped dead when she saw me, her face a mixture of shock and something else, defiance. "Brenda," she said, her voice steady. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the photograph. She sighed, a long, exasperated sound, as if I were a child who had just broken a vase. She walked past me into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. "Look," she said, not even turning to face me. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "Tell me what, Heather?" She finally turned, her expression hard. "That I'm in love with your husband. That we're in love. And he's leaving you for me." I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. How long?" "A while," she said with a shrug. "About a year. It just sort of happened. You were always so busy, so safe. So boring. Walter deserves to have some fun, to really live. I make him feel alive." The words he had used. She makes me feel alive. It wasn't just a breakup line. It was their line. The money, I breathed, the final, horrific piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The $80,000. This time, she did smile. It was a cruel, triumphant smirk that I had never seen on her face before. "Oh, that? Well, we couldn't very well start our new life together with his family's debt hanging over our heads, could we? Think of it as your wedding gift to us, sis. A very, very generous one." I don't remember driving home. I think my body just went on autopilot. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my silent house, the house that was no longer ours, just mine. The betrayal from my husband was a knife in the heart. The betrayal from my own sister, that was a poison that seeped into my very soul. But there was one more person. One more piece to this nightmare. I picked up the phone and, with numb fingers, dialed my mother-in-law, Lorraine. A part of me, a tiny, foolish part, still hoped there was some mistake. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she could fix this. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" Her voice was cool, distant. "Lorraine," I said, fighting to keep my voice from breaking. "It's Brenda. Walter just left. He's with Heather." There was a pause. And then I heard it. A soft, low chuckle that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, Brenda," Lorraine said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You poor, naive girl. Did you really think that money would buy you a place in our family?" I couldn't breathe. "We always knew Heather was the right one for Walter," she continued, her voice gaining a smug confidence. "She has spirit. She has class. She understands our world. You were always just a sweet, simple little thing. A good workhorse to get us out of a bind. And I have to say, you performed beautifully." The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. Her words echoed in my head, each repetition twisting the knife deeper. A good workhorse. We always liked her better anyway. A good workhorse. As the full weight of the conspiracy crashed over me, something inside me broke. The hurt, the humiliation, the sheer, calculated cruelty of it all began to crystallize into something else. Something harder. Colder. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, her face pale with shock. But as I stared, I saw a flicker in those eyes. A tiny spark in the darkness. It wasn't sadness. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. They had used me. My husband, my sister, his family. They had formed a pact to drain me of every dollar I had, of every ounce of love and loyalty, and then discard me like a piece of trash. They thought they had won. They thought they could walk away, laughing, to start their new, debt-free life, leaving me broken in the wreckage. But as I stood there, in my empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I thought I knew, a promise formed on my lips. It wasn't a loud declaration. It was a quiet, deadly whisper to the woman in the mirror. "This isn't over," I said, my voice low and steady. "Not by a long shot. They have no idea what I'm capable of. But they are about to find out." I spent the rest of that night not crying, but planning. I went online and started digging. I pulled up every bank statement, every credit card bill from the past 2 years. And I found them. The little things I had overlooked. The expensive dinners for 2 on Walter's credit card on nights he was supposedly working late. The charge for a bracelet from a jewelry store a week before Heather's birthday. The hotel bill from a weekend trip he told me was a sales conference. It was all there. I had just been too trusting to see it. They thought I was a simple, sweet schoolteacher. They were right. I was. But they had forgotten one thing about teachers. We're patient. We're methodical. And we know how to do our research. The next few days were a frenzy of methodical action. The grief was still there, a heavy cloak I couldn't take off, but the rage was the fire that kept me moving. First, the practical things. I canceled our joint credit cards. I changed the locks on the house. I gathered every financial document I could find and put them in a locked file box. Then, I called a lawyer. The news was exactly what I expected, and exactly what they had counted on. The money I had given them, the $80,000, was legally considered a gift. Because I had willingly transferred the funds, without a signed loan agreement, I had no legal recourse to reclaim it. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller," the lawyer said kindly. "My advice would be to finalize the divorce, cut your losses, and move on." Move on. As if it were that simple. As if I could just forget the years of my life I had wasted, the future that had been stolen from me. Moving on wasn't an option. But moving forward, that, I could do. I knew that Brenda Miller, the heartbroken teacher, couldn't win this fight. She was too soft, too trusting. They had built their entire plan around her being weak. So, I decided Brenda Miller had to die. And from her ashes, someone new had to be born. I started with a call to an old college friend, Spencer. He'd been a bit of a computer nerd back then, and now he ran a small but very discreet private investigation agency. I met him for coffee at a diner halfway across the state, far from anyone who might recognize me. "Spencer," I said, after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "I need your help. It's a sensitive matter." I gave him a sanitized version of the story. I told him my husband had left me under suspicious financial circumstances and I was worried his family might be involved in something illegal. I left out the part about my sister. It was still too raw, too humiliating to say out loud. Spencer listened intently, his brow furrowed. "This is serious stuff, Brenda. If there's fraud involved, it can get messy. Are you sure you want to open this can of worms?" I met his gaze, my own eyes hard. "I'm already in the can of worms, Spencer. I just want to know what kind of worms I'm dealing with." He nodded slowly. "All right. Give me everything you have. Bank records, names, dates. I'll start digging. But be careful. If these people are as ruthless as you think, they won't like being poked. While Spencer started his investigation, I began my own transformation. I took a portion of the little money I had left, the emergency fund I kept separate from Walter that he thankfully didn't know about, and I invested it. Not in stocks or bonds, but in myself. First, I changed my appearance. I drove to a salon in a neighboring city and told the stylist to cut off my long, brown hair, the hair Walter had always said he loved. I watched in the mirror as years of my old self fell to the floor. I walked out with a sleek, sharp, chin-length bob, dyed a sophisticated shade of auburn. Next, I bought a new wardrobe. I threw out the sensible teacher clothes, the cardigans and comfortable flats. I bought tailored pantsuits, silk blouses, and a pair of wickedly expensive high heels that made me stand 2 inches taller. They were clothes that screamed power and confidence, even when I didn't feel it. I started calling myself Beverly. Beverly Thorne. It sounded strong, elegant, and a little bit dangerous. I practiced a new way of speaking, a new way of carrying myself. Beverly didn't slouch. Beverly made direct eye contact. Beverly didn't apologize for taking up space. But the biggest change was happening on the inside. Every night, after my tutoring sessions, I didn't watch TV or read novels. I studied. I read books on investing, finance, and corporate law. I learned about shell corporations, tax loopholes, and offshore accounts. The world that Walter and his family inhabited, the world of money and power, was no longer a mystery to me. I was learning their language. And I discovered, to my own surprise, that I had a knack for it. I started making a few small, cautious investments online. A little here, a little there. And I started to win. My small nest egg began to grow, slowly but steadily. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very skills I was using to rebuild my wealth were the same ones they had used to destroy me. But unlike them, I wasn't driven by greed. Every dollar I earned was another bullet in the gun I was loading. After a few months, I was ready. Beverly Thorne was ready. Spencer had come through with some initial information. The Thompson family's finances were messy, but on the surface, mostly legal. However, he did find one interesting thread. The charity foundation that Lorraine was so proud of, the one that got her name in the society pages, had some very questionable expenses. Large consulting fees paid to companies that seemed to exist only on paper. It was a start. My new persona, Beverly, began to make appearances. I joined the same charity organizations Lorraine was a part of. I bought a ticket to a fundraising gala that I knew she, Walter, and Heather would be attending. It was time for my creation to face her creators. The night of the gala, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was the first time I would see them all together since that horrible day. I walked into the opulent ballroom, my head held high. The red silk dress I wore was a suit of armor. I spotted them near the center of the room. Lorraine was holding court, laughing with a group of women. Walter stood beside her, looking handsome in his tuxedo. And clinging to his arm, sparkling in a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage, was my sister, Heather. She looked deliriously happy. A hot flash of pure hatred crawled up my neck. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, you are Beverly. Not Brenda. I made my way to the bar, ordered a glass of champagne, and positioned myself so I would be in their line of sight. It was Heather who saw me first. Her eyes widened, a flicker of confusion on her face. She recognized me, but she didn't. She tugged on Walter's arm and whispered something. He turned, and his jaw went slack. For a moment, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. I smiled, a cool, detached smile, and walked towards them. Walter? Heather? My goodness, it's been a while, I said, my voice smooth and practiced. It wasn't my voice. It was Beverly's. They were speechless. I turned to Lorraine, extending a perfectly manicured hand. And you must be Lorraine Thompson. I've heard so much about your work with the foundation. Beverly Thorne. I'm new to the area, just moved my investment firm here. Lorraine, ever the socialite, recovered first. She shook my hand, her eyes darting between me and Walter, trying to piece it all together. Miss Thorne. A pleasure. I don't believe we've met. Oh, I think you know my family, I said lightly, turning my gaze back to my sister. I'm Brenda's older sister. The color drained from Heather's face. Walter looked like he was about to be sick. Brenda? Heather stammered. What happened to you? You look different. Divorce changes a person, don't you think? I said, taking a slow sip of my champagne. My eyes met Walter's over the rim of the glass. It forces you to reevaluate your assets. And your liabilities. I let my gaze drift pointedly back to Heather. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. I could see the panic in their eyes. The carefully constructed world they had built was suddenly on shaky ground. Before I left, I found Heather alone near the powder room. That's a lovely bracelet, I said, gesturing to the piece on her wrist. I knew it well. It was the one Walter had charged to our joint account, the one he'd told me was a corporate gift for a client's wife. He has good taste. But be careful, dear sister. Men who buy pretty things for one woman while married to another, well, old habits die hard. I walked away, leaving her standing there, her hand frozen over the bracelet, a look of dawning horror on her face. The first seed of doubt had been planted. And I was just getting started. The encounter at the gala was just a taste. It was exhilarating, seeing the fear in their eyes, but I knew that personal jabs wouldn't be enough. To truly make them pay, I had to dismantle the very foundation of their power, their money and their reputation. I threw myself back into my research, fueled by that small victory. I continued my late-night studies, but now I had a focus. I wasn't just learning about finance in general, I was learning about their finances. I cross-referenced every piece of information Spencer gave me with public records, old news articles, and business filings. I was building a map of their financial empire, looking for the weak points. It was during one of these deep dives, around 2 a.m. with a pot of stale coffee by my side, that I found it. Spencer had flagged a name for me, Arthur Thompson, Walter's great-uncle. He had passed away about 5 years ago. The official cause of death was an accidental fall down the stairs at his secluded country home. He was a wealthy man, a bit of an eccentric who had been estranged from the family for years. According to his will, his entire estate, a considerable inheritance, was left to a distant cousin nobody had ever heard of. It seemed straightforward enough. But something about the timeline nagged at me. Arthur's death coincided almost perfectly with the beginning of the Thompson family's financial upswing. Before his death, they were struggling. After his death, they suddenly had the capital to launch new ventures and Lorraine's charity foundation was established. I asked Spencer to dig deeper into Arthur. Specifically, into that distant cousin. A week later, he called me. His voice was low, serious. Brenda, you're not going to believe this. The cousin who inherited everything? He doesn't exist. The name, the social security number, it's all fabricated. The money from Arthur's estate was moved through a series of shell companies and ended up in an offshore account. An account controlled by Walter's father. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just financial trickery anymore. This was a multi-million-dollar inheritance that had been stolen. And it happened right after a convenient accidental death. I didn't have proof of foul play, not yet, but the smell of it was overwhelming. This was the weapon I needed. It was big, it was dirty, and it was undeniable. Now, I needed someone to fire it. Through my new social circles as Beverly Thorne, I had made a point of getting to know people in the media. One name stood out, Corinne Jeffries. She was a tenacious, no-nonsense investigative journalist for a major city newspaper, known for taking down powerful people. She had a reputation for being incorruptible. I arranged a meeting with her, using Beverly's name. We met at a discreet hotel bar. "Miss Thorne," she said, getting straight to business. "Your message said you had a story for me." I slid a plain manila envelope across the table. I didn't give her everything, not yet. Just enough to light the fuse. It contained documented proof of the fake heir, the shell companies, and the final destination of Arthur Thompson's inheritance, all tied directly to Walter's father. Corinne's eyes widened as she scanned the first few pages. "This is explosive. If it's true." "Every piece of information in that envelope has been verified," I assured her. "Of course, I'll need to remain an anonymous source. I have business interests to protect." "Of course," she agreed quickly, her reporter's instincts buzzing. "If this checks out, this is more than just a story. This is a scandal that could bring down one of the city's most prominent families." I left her there, poring over the files. My heart was racing with a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. The first real domino was about to fall. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, splashed across the front page of the newspaper in a massive headline: "Prominent family implicated in multi-million-dollar inheritance fraud." The article didn't mention murder, not yet. Corinne was too smart for that. But it laid out the financial trail in damning detail. It raised questions about the convenient timing and the mysterious heir. It was a masterpiece of implication. I watched from my apartment as the story spread like wildfire. By noon, it was on every news channel. By evening, the district attorney's office had publicly announced they were opening an official probe into the Thompson family's finances. The carefully cultivated image of the Thompson family, the image of old money, philanthropy, and respectability, was beginning to crumble. And I was the one holding the sledgehammer. The fallout from Corinne's article was immediate and glorious to watch. The Thompsons were in full-blown panic mode. They hired a high-powered PR firm that issued a furious denial, calling the story a baseless attack by a disgruntled source. They threatened lawsuits against the newspaper. But it was too late. The damage was done. The story was too juicy, the evidence too compelling. Their carefully constructed world was on fire, and I was sitting back, enjoying the warmth. Business partners started to distance themselves. Invitations to social events were quietly rescinded. The Thompson name, once a symbol of influence, was now toxic. I knew it was only a matter of time before Walter figured it out. The call came on a Friday afternoon. It was an unknown number, but I knew who it was. I let it ring 3 times before answering, keeping my voice cool and neutral. "Hello? Don't play dumb with me, Brenda." Walter's voice was tight with a rage I hadn't heard since the day he left. "Or should I say Beverly? I have to hand it to you. I didn't think you had it in you." I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "You know damn well who this is," he snarled. "You did this. That article, the investigation, this has your fingerprints all over it. How did you do it? What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? You want your precious $80,000 back?" "Oh, Walter," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "You still don't get it, do you? This was never about the money. This is about justice. This is about consequences. You and your family, and my sister, you thought you could use me and throw me away like garbage. You're about to learn how wrong you were." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Brenda, please. Whatever you think you're doing, it's not too late to stop. We can talk about this. We can make things right. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of the old Brenda, the woman who had loved this man, the woman who might have been swayed by that plea. But then I remembered the coldness in his eyes as he walked out the door. The cruelty in my sister's smirk. The smug dismissal in his mother's voice. "No, Walter," I said firmly, my voice like ice. "It is far, far too late for that. You all made your choice a year ago. Now, it's time to live with it." I ended the call before he could respond. My heart was pounding, but it was a thrill, not fear. The gauntlet had been thrown down. But he wasn't done. The next day, he showed up unannounced at the school where I still taught part-time. He cornered me in the hallway as I was walking to my car. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he reeked of stale whiskey. "We need to talk," he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled my arm away, my expression unreadable. "There's nothing to talk about. You need to leave before I call security." "I'm not leaving until you tell me what you've done," he said, his voice rising. A few of the other teachers started to look over. "You're destroying my family. Our business. Our reputation. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" I looked him dead in the eye. The man I had once loved, now just a pathetic, desperate stranger. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my voice calm and clear. "It sounds like you have a lot of problems, Walter. But they have nothing to do with me." I turned and walked away without a backward glance. As I got into my car, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was from the pure, unadulterated satisfaction of seeing him so completely undone. As I drove away, I pulled out a cheap burner phone I kept for moments like this. I typed a simple, anonymous message and sent it to his number. It said only 3 words, "This is just the beginning." He looked down at his phone, his face went white, and then he scrambled away like a cornered animal. And in that moment, for the first time in over a year, I felt like I was back in control of my own life. The real war had just begun. If you're still listening, could you please do me a huge favor and like this video, and comment the number 1 down below? It lets me know that you wonderful people are still here, and it tells me that you're on this journey with me. Your support is a massive encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1 so I can see you, and now, let me tell you what happened next. Seeing Walter so rattled was satisfying, but I knew that public shame and financial investigation were only part of the equation. To truly make them pay, I had to turn them against each other. The weak link, I knew, was my sister. Heather had always been driven by 2 things, money and attention. Now that both were under threat, she would be easy to manipulate. I continued my charade as Beverly Thorne, the savvy investor. I accidentally ran into Heather at a high-end salon a week later. She looked stressed, her usual sparkle dimmed. "Heather, darling," I exclaimed, feigning surprise. "How are you holding up with all this unpleasantness in the news?" She forced a tight smile. "We're fine. It's all lies, of course." "Of course," I said, patting her hand sympathetically. "But you must be so worried. A financial investigation like this, they can freeze assets, you know. They can even look into the finances of partners. Even fiancés." I let that word hang in the air. I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. "They wouldn't. I have nothing to do with the family business." "Don't they? That lovely new condo, the car, those beautiful clothes, you're living off their money, aren't you? To an investigator, that makes you a beneficiary of potentially fraudulent funds. It could get very messy for you." I sighed dramatically. "It's a shame. A beautiful young woman like you, getting dragged into all this. Walter should be protecting you." I had planted the seed. Now, it was time to water it. A few days later, I put the next phase into motion. Spencer had a contact, a young, aspiring actress who was happy to make a few $100s. We staged a series of photographs. The actress was seen having a very intimate-looking lunch with Walter at a secluded restaurant. Then another of them laughing as they got into his car. They were perfectly innocent, but they looked damning. I sent the photos to Heather from an anonymous email account. The subject line was simply, "Thought you should see this." I knew Heather's temperament. She was possessive and jealous. The idea that Walter might be hedging his bets, looking for a new partner now that the money was in jeopardy, would drive her insane. The final piece of this little drama was a fake legal document. I had a graphic designer friend create a very official-looking subpoena from the DA's office. It was a witness summons, and at the top of the witness list was the name, Heather Miller. I had it delivered to her condo by a messenger service. It was a complete bluff, but she wouldn't know that. All she would see was her name on a legal document connecting her to a federal investigation. The effect was exactly what I'd hoped for. Through a contact Spencer had at her new condo building, I learned that the screaming matches between her and Walter became a nightly occurrence. She accused him of cheating. She accused him of dragging her into his family's mess. He, in turn, called her a gold digger who was only with him for the money. The perfect romance they had built on the ruins of my life was starting to crumble under its own weight. Heather was panicking. I knew she didn't have the stomach for a real fight. She had spent her whole life running from responsibility. And I knew, without a doubt, that when things got truly ugly, she would run again. I just had to make sure things got very, very ugly. While Heather and Walter were busy tearing each other apart, I turned my attention to the heart of their empire, Thompson Industries. The investigation had already hurt them, but they were still solvent. They still had power. It was time to take that away. This was where my months of late nights studying paid off. I had been tracking their company's stock for months. I knew its vulnerabilities. I had also, as Beverly Thorne, cultivated relationships with several key investors and market analysts. I started quietly. I would have lunch with an influential hedge fund manager and, in my role as the insightful Beverly Thorne, I'd express concerns about Thompson Industries. With the ongoing investigation, I'd say, swirling the wine in my glass, I just worry about their stability. There are whispers of more revelations to come. I'm advising my clients to pull back. Rumors, in the world of finance, can be more powerful than facts. The whispers I started began to spread. The stock, already weakened, began to dip further. Then, I executed the main attack. It's a strategy called short selling. To put it simply, you borrow shares of a stock, sell them immediately, and then hope the price goes down. When it does, you buy the shares back at the lower price to return them, and you pocket the difference. It's a gamble, a bet that a company is going to fail. Using the significant capital I had built up, I placed a massive short bet against Thompson Industries. It was a declaration of war on the stock market floor. To fuel the fire, I anonymously leaked another piece of information to my journalist friend, Corinne. This one was smaller, but perfectly timed. It was proof that the Thompson Charity Foundation had spent over $100,000 on redecorating Lorraine's living room, listing it as community outreach event expenses. The story broke the next day. It was the kind of greedy, out-of-touch detail that the public loves to hate. It was the final nail in the coffin of their public image. The market reacted violently. My short bet, combined with the new scandal, created a panic. Everyone started selling. The stock price for Thompson Industries didn't just dip, it plummeted. It was a nosedive. I sat in my home office, which was really just a spare bedroom, watching the numbers on my screen. Green numbers, showing my profits, were soaring. Red numbers, showing the value of the Thompson family's legacy, were crashing. In 1 week, their company lost 70% of its value. The financial empire that had taken generations to build was crumbling in a matter of days. They weren't just on the verge of bankruptcy anymore. They were in a free fall, with no parachute. And I was the one who had pushed them out of the plane. The financial collapse of Thompson Industries was the breaking point for my dear sister. Heather had signed up to be the glamorous wife of a wealthy heir, not the broke girlfriend of a potential felon. She had no loyalty, no spine. Her entire world was built on a foundation of money and ease, and that foundation had just been reduced to rubble. I didn't have to do anything else. I just had to wait. The call came from Spencer about a week after the stock market crash. "You're not going to believe this," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Our girl just cleaned out the condo. A moving truck showed up this morning. Took everything of value. Looks like she flew the coop." I couldn't help but smile. It was so predictably Heather. Later that day, I got an email. It was from Walter. It was a desperate, rambling message. He told me he had come home to an empty apartment. Heather was gone. She had taken all the jewelry, emptied their joint account, and left a note on the kitchen counter. He attached a picture of the note to the email. I clicked on it. The note was written on expensive-looking pink stationery, in my sister's loopy, dramatic handwriting. "Wally," it began. "I'm so sorry it has to be this way, but I can't do this anymore. I can't be dragged down with you and your crazy family. I'm not built for struggle. I need to be taken care of. This whole mess is more than I signed up for. I've taken what I believe I am owed for my time and emotional distress. Good luck with the lawyers. Don't try to find me. Love, Heather." Love, Heather. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She had helped orchestrate the ruin of my life, happily spent my life savings, and now, at the first sign of real trouble, she had abandoned him without a second thought, taking whatever she could grab on the way out. Walter's email was pathetic. He was completely broken. He had lost his family's fortune, his reputation, and now, the woman he had thrown everything away for. He begged me in the email to tell him what he had done to deserve this. He actually asked me that. I read the email, looked at the picture of the note, and I felt nothing. No pity. No sympathy. Just a cold, clean sense of justice. They had built their relationship on a bed of lies and greed. It was only fitting that it ended the same way. I thought about replying. I thought about listing all the things he had done, all the pain he had caused. But I realized it would be a waste of energy. He would never truly understand. So instead, I just typed one word and hit send. Karma. Then, I deleted his email and blocked his address. He was no longer my problem. With Heather gone and the family fortune in ruins, Walter was a man adrift. He had nothing left. I suppose, in his desperation, he thought he had one last card to play. He thought he could appeal to the woman he had married, the soft-hearted, forgiving Brenda he thought he knew. He showed up at my house a few nights later. I saw him through the peephole, standing on my porch, looking like a ghost. He was thinner, his expensive suit hanging off his frame. He looked 10 years older. I almost didn't open the door. But I realized I needed this. I needed to see this through to the very end. I opened it, leaving the chain on. "What do you want, Walter?" I asked, my voice flat. "Brenda, please," he choked out, his eyes red and swollen. "Please, just let me talk to you for 5 minutes." I hesitated, then slowly unlatched the chain. He stumbled inside, looking around the small, simple house he had once called home as if it were a foreign country. He started talking, the words tumbling out of him in a desperate, pathetic rush. He told me it was all his mother's idea. That Lorraine had been whispering in his ear for years that I wasn't good enough for him. He said Heather had seduced him, that she had made him feel like a new man. He blamed them. He blamed everyone but himself. "It was the money, Bren," he cried, actual tears streaming down his face. We were so desperate. My dad made some terrible deals. We were going to lose everything. My mother, she said you were the only way out. She said you loved me enough to do anything for me. And she was right. He was admitting it. He was admitting to the entire, cold-blooded conspiracy. And Heather? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She was part of it, he admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. She thought it was exciting. A game. She never loved me. I see that now. She just wanted the money. The money you gave us. He finally sank to his knees on my living room floor, the same floor I had scrubbed on my hands and knees for years. He grabbed my hand, his own trembling. I am so sorry, Brenda, he sobbed. I was a fool. I was weak. I threw away the only good thing in my life. Please. I know you're behind all this. I don't know how, but I know it's you. Please, make it stop. I'll do anything. I'll pay you back. Every single cent. I swear. I looked down at the man at my feet. The man I had once promised to love, honor, and cherish. The man who had conspired with my own sister to ruin me. And I searched for any feeling inside myself. A spark of the old love. A flicker of pity. A hint of compassion. But there was nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my love for him used to be. I pulled my hand from his grasp. Get up, Walter, I said, my voice like steel. He looked up at me, hope flickering in his tear-filled eyes. Your apology doesn't give me back the sleepless nights, I said calmly. It doesn't give me back the retirement I lost, or the car my father left me. It doesn't erase the fact that you and my own sister looked me in the eye and lied to me every single day while you bled me dry. Your apology means nothing. I walked to the door and opened it. You're right about one thing, I said, as he slowly, shakily got to his feet. It's too late. Now get out of my house. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. He finally stumbled out the door, a completely broken man. I watched him go, and I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt closure. I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that he could never hurt me again. The final act of the Thompson family drama didn't play out in a boardroom or a fancy living room. It played out in a sterile, impersonal courthouse. Walter's pathetic confession to me was useless in a legal sense, but it didn't matter. The evidence I had compiled, combined with the trail currents journalism had uncovered, was more than enough. The dam of their secrets had broken, and now the flood was washing everything away. Emboldened by the public scandal, former employees started coming forward, talking to the DA's office. A bookkeeper who had been fired years ago for asking too many questions came forward with ledgers she had secretly copied. A former executive assistant provided emails detailing the conspiracy to hide assets from the IRS. The investigation into Arthur Thompson's death was reopened. While they couldn't prove murder, they did find enough evidence of medical negligence and forged documents to add even more serious charges to the pile. The arrests came on a cold Wednesday morning. I watched it on the news, sitting on my sofa, drinking a cup of coffee. They showed footage of FBI agents leading Walter's father out of his mansion in handcuffs. Then, they showed Lorraine. She was always so perfectly put together, so poised. But in that moment, as the agents led her to a waiting car, her mask of cold superiority finally shattered. She just looked like a scared, old woman. Finally, they showed Walter. He looked resigned, defeated. As he was put in the car, he looked up and for a moment, his eyes seemed to find the camera lens. It felt like he was looking right at me. And in that look, I saw a final, dawning understanding of just who he had messed with. The trials were swift. With the mountain of evidence against them, they had no choice but to take plea deals. Walter and his father received lengthy prison sentences for fraud, conspiracy, and tax evasion. Lorraine, due to her age and a very expensive lawyer, got a shorter sentence, but she was financially ruined and socially exiled. Her reputation, the thing she valued above all else, was gone forever. I read the news in the paper, and I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. It wasn't the explosive, fist-pumping victory I had once imagined. It was a quiet, deep sense of rightness. The scales of justice, which had been so horribly unbalanced, had finally been set right. The world made sense again. My name was never publicly connected to the takedown. To the world, the fall of the Thompson family was the result of good journalism and diligent police work. Beverly Thorne, the savvy investor, quietly faded from the financial scene, her work done. And Brenda Miller, well, Brenda Miller was finally free. The quest that had consumed my life for the past year was over. And for the first time, I had to face the terrifying question, what now? With the trials over and the Thompsons a fading, ugly memory, the rage that had fueled me for so long finally began to subside. And in its place, there was a strange quiet. An emptiness. For over a year, my entire life had been defined by one mission, revenge. Now that it was accomplished, I felt a little lost. The character of Beverly Thorne, the strong, ruthless woman I had created, no longer had a purpose. I had to figure out who Brenda Miller was again. I didn't want to be the naive, trusting woman I was before. But I didn't want to be the cold, calculating woman I had become either. I needed to find a middle ground. I started by taking a leave of absence from my teaching job. I needed space to think. I used the considerable amount of money I had made from my short-selling venture, the ultimate irony, getting rich off their ruin, to do something good. The idea came to me one afternoon as I was reading stories online, stories from other women who had been financially devastated by partners, who had been victims of economic abuse. Their stories were all different, but the pain, the feeling of helplessness, was the same as mine. That's when I knew what I had to do. I started a foundation. I called it the Phoenix Foundation, for women rising from the ashes of financial betrayal. I used my knowledge of finance and law, and my connections as Beverly, to set it up. We would provide legal aid, financial counseling, and support groups for women who had been left with nothing. We would help them fight back, not with revenge, but with knowledge and resources. We would empower them to rebuild their lives. Pouring my energy into this new project was cathartic. It felt right. It was taking the darkest chapter of my life and turning it into something positive, something that could help others. I was no longer just tearing something down, I was building something up. About 6 months after the foundation launched, we had our first major success story. We helped a single mother of 3 who had been tricked by her ex-husband into signing over the deed to their house. We got her a pro bono lawyer, and she won her house back. The day she called me, crying with gratitude, I felt a sense of joy more profound than any satisfaction revenge had ever given me. During this time, I got a letter. It was forwarded from my old address. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Heather. She had tracked me down. The letter was long and rambling, full of self-pity. She wrote about how hard her life was now, how she was working a dead-end job in some small town. She said she was sorry, that she had been young and stupid and manipulated by Lorraine and Walter. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I read the letter once. Then, I walked to the kitchen, tore it into small pieces, and dropped it into the trash can. Forgiveness was a gift, and it was one she hadn't earned. She was still just a problem I didn't have anymore. I started teaching again, just part-time. I had missed the kids, their laughter, their simple, honest view of the world. It grounded me. It reminded me of the Brenda I used to be, the one who believed in goodness. It's been 3 years now since Walter walked out my door. My life is quiet, but it's a good quiet. It's a peaceful quiet. The Phoenix Foundation is thriving. We've helped hundreds of women. My work there is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I didn't look for a new relationship. I wasn't ready, and maybe I never would be. But I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had pushed away during my quest for revenge. I made new ones. I learned that my own company was more than enough. My happiness was no longer dependent on anyone else. Sometimes, I think about Beverly Thorne. She's a part of me now, a reminder of the strength I never knew I had. She's the steel in my spine. But she doesn't rule my life anymore. I am Brenda. Not the naive Brenda of the past, but a stronger, wiser version. A survivor. The other day, I was walking in the park near my house. It was a beautiful autumn day, the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. A young couple was having a picnic on a blanket, laughing, looking so in love. For a moment, a shadow of the old pain passed over me. But then it was gone. I didn't feel envy or sadness. I just felt peace. I used to think that revenge would be the thing that healed me. I thought watching them fall would bring me peace. But I was wrong. Revenge was just a tool. It was the fire I needed to burn away my old life and clear the ground for something new. The real peace, the true victory, came after. It came from rebuilding a life from the ashes, a life of purpose. It came from helping other women find their own strength. That, I've come to realize, is the sweetest revenge of all. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if this story resonated with you, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Know that you are not alone, and there is always a way to rise again. Take care.